Excellent work, boys. Time to rescue the others, and make the slavers pay. As much as I dislike the idea of giving money to a bunch of greedy slavers, buying our comrades out of slavery would be the least risky way of freeing them. And so, looking to top up our wallets, we journeyed to the nearby city of Heft. Razor still had a substantial bounty on his head for punching a local billionaire, which is always the morally correct thing to do when you see one. So we had Hammer turn him in for the reward. Then, once the coast was clear, Razor lockpicked his way out of prison and made a run for it. Being much too fast for his fat, lazy, capital-grubbing pursuers, he got away rather easily. And just like that, we were 10,000 cats closer to being able to afford our friends. Now, Hammer was the only one of our number who wasn't a branded criminal in the United Cities, so he headed off to the slave camp while the rest of us remained at a distance. However, upon arriving, he discovered that the slavers didn't actually want to sell us our friends back. I guess the scumbags figured they could get more value out of our friends by working them to death. So, a new plan was needed. Hammer whispered the word among the gang that whoever could break out of their shackles should do it. Then later that night, I snuck into the camp and began working away at opening the cages. Which wasn't particularly easy to do since I was missing an arm, but I did manage to get a couple of them open. And just like that, we were off. Didn't take long for the guards to notice us, but once again nature proved that naked Hivers are better runners than heavily armored humans. And so as I snuck our brothers out during the dead of night, Razor ran in and snatched them away in broad daylight. And sure, he risked getting shot by harpoons, but fortunately their aim really sucked. Unfortunately, the slavers managed to figure out where we were camping and knocked my frickin' leg off with a spiky club. It was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life, but pain only served to harden my resolve. Then while Razor ran off to buy prosthetic limbs for us, the rebel farmers attacked us. Again. You know, it really is difficult being champion of the poor when they keep showing up to rub salt in your open wounds. Anyways, after Razor came back for a minute to beat the crap out of them, he made a quick trip to Heft to buy some limbs. He was in and out before the guards had a chance to recognize him, and with new limbs came new resolve. The slavers would never be able to stop us, no matter how many arms and legs they took off. Neither could the basket-head freaks or any other degenerates who wandered into our camp. In fact, they were doing us a favor by donating their gear to our cause. Except for this one group of weirdos who decided it would be a good idea to charge into battle in their underwear. Not quite sure what they were thinking. Capitalism rots the brain. Anyhow, just when we thought we'd found a safer place to hide out, bounty hunters showed up at our doorstep. But whatever. The whole world being against us just went to show how right we were. That and the fact that we won. We became a symbol of freedom to those in chains. Most of whom we left there because they didn't align with us ideologically, but still. We proved that with enough willpower and willingness to cooperate, freedom could be attained. Then once we had freed our entire number, we set our sights on finding a new home where the slavers could never bother us again. The island just to the southeast was uninhabited, as far as we knew, so we made our exodus in that direction. On the way, I made a quick stop in Heft to steal some building materials, which is fine because I was stealing from capitalists, and you know how they are, and we would need building materials to build ourselves a proper city. Then exiting the wilderness, we crossed the Red Sea through wet water and emerged on the shores of paradise. There on the ground, a gift awaited us in the form of crab eggs, which we could then trade for any supplies we might need. Of course, taking them did sour our relationship with the local crabs, but this conflict was inevitable when you think about it. There can really only be one dominant species on this island. And that night, we feasted on the flesh of our foes in celebration of our first victory on this turf. But when dawn came, it was time to work, and there was much work to be done. There we hid in our bubble of bliss. But bliss doesn't last. The notorious slaver army known as the Hivers had caught wind of our new settlement and wanted to draft us into their war machine. So we did the most logical thing to do and ran for our lives. And like most slavers, the Hivers had skipped out on cardio hard. So they gave up the chase pretty quick and went home. And with that, we were happily able to get back to work. Until the crabs came back for revenge. Yeah, it turned out the crabs we'd been hunting so far were just pups. The adults, on the other hand, were freaking huge and very difficult to take down. So we spent our days and nights trying to get things built while getting our legs pinched off and just getting the snot kicked out of us in general. But hey, we did have a whole 2 sleeping bags to recover in. If there is a hell out there, I can only assume it must be filled to the brim with fully grown crabs. Anyway, we obviously needed some time off and some new limbs, so we headed over to Black Scratch for the weekend. And in keeping with our usual amount of luck, we got mugged by pirates along the way. But I guess it was fine since we mugged them in return. And when we finally got to the Black Scratch Inn, we realized that the cost of bread and board was absolute robbery, which is why I had no ethical qualms with robbing the local residents. Again, look, we're idealists, and in the ideal world people don't have to pay for things. Anyways, once we were back on our feet, we headed home again. There'd be no more fooling around this time. If we couldn't drive the crabs out, then we'd wall them out. Well, it was more of a fence, really, but we were racing against the clock, so it would have to do. And it seemed the construction of our wall already made our camp look like a proper settlement, and attracted our first border hopper. But he was a hiver like us, so we were cool with it. Now, he did tell a pretty fishy story and was obviously an escaped slave, but again, so were we. And having finally established some basic security, we could finally labor in peace. Just kidding. Pretty soon the crabs were back at it to kick our door in, but we fixed it faster than they could break it while Green shot them in the face till they stopped moving. Then our other nemesis, the slave traders, showed up to collect the newest member of our community. Well, if they wanted him, they'd have to go through us. So while they busted down our gate, we all ran into our newly constructed mess hall and attempted to block the door by building a table in front of it. Now normally building a table takes quite a lot of time, but Beep, as it turned out, was an excellent carpenter, and fortunately the slavers all ran into the wrong building. By the time they figured out where we were, the world's sturdiest table stood in their way. Now a few of them did manage to vault over it, but we were more than capable of dealing with 4 or 5 of them at once. And being the tactical genius that I was, I had installed a couple of turrets on the roof so we could mow down enemies who dared to approach our doorstep. And the battle for the dining room went exactly as you might expect from a mathematical standpoint. Also, it turned out the rain around here was acidic, so tough luck to any non-hivers to get knocked out on our turf. Eventually, we had to step outside to deal with the rest of them, and while they did put up a good fight, they made the grave mistake of thinking we wouldn't use every cheap trick in the book and then confiscate their medical supplies. So yeah, this is what happens to slavers around here. And when the intruders saw that the battle was lost, they fled fear-stricken into the night, and also into crabs. Thus, for a time, the land knew peace. The battle of the 3 armies was over, but the war on capitalism had just begun.